Yeah, I had to work on top secret crypto equipment, so I had a top secret crypto clearance. And if they went, the one time I had a crypto machine went bad, and I had to take it to from Dong Ha to Da Nang to a higher echelon repair shop to have that fixed. And of course, that's top secret equipment, and I had to take it in my truck. I had to get a Jeep, take out a Jeep, and head across the country with that thing. And of course, with dire warnings from my commanding officer that I'd better not be caught with that thing, because if the enemy got a hold of that, that would be a big deal. So I had to do it there again. That was one of those cases where I had to do. I was supposed to catch a convoy from Dong Ha to Da Nang, and I got there just a little bit where the convoy was started, got a little late, and they had left already. So I thought I could catch up with it. However, I never did catch up with it. So I had a pretty hairy ride through the country that time to get to Da Nang. And once I got there, I could I got put up in an Air Force uh, barracks, or the Air Force compound put me up, and boy, was there a difference between the way we lived and they lived. I mean, they had all kinds of luxuries, and it was just like moving from a tent to all of a sudden to really fancy hotel. And the food too. They had mess halls that were top notch food, where we had whatever we could get, out in the jungle there. So that was quite nice. And also we were it was on the ocean, so I bought a pair of shorts, and I could go swimming in the ocean for a couple days. And so I had all of a sudden it was like a short time of relaxation until I got it fixed and had to head back to reality again. Yeah, one of the incidents that we had with my quick reaction team was that one time we got a call in the middle of the night. We had to get up and get our all of our guns and grenades and our flak jackets on, and we had got word that the Marines had captured a Viet Cong out in the rice paddies, not too terribly far from outside of our perimeter, and they didn't want to have the bother of bringing that one Kong in, so they called us, and our team had to go out and meet up with them, and take that prisoner back to our compound. Well, so we had to all go into a tent in the middle of the night where we had completely blackout, so that you get your night vision in. So they'd have to. I mean, there was no you weren't allowed, so you block out even starlight, moonlight, everything, so that when you came out of that tent, you could see real good even with the starlight, you could see good enough to get around. Back that day, we never had any night vision stuff or anything like that. So anyway, we headed out into the jungle. We had a sergeant he was kind of a gung ho dunce that thought he knew everything, and he was real braggadocio type of guy. He thought he fought in Korea supposedly. Anyway, he didn't know anything about anything. It turns out he took us out out into the fields, and we went through rice paddies and tall grass over our heads. We put ourselves into extreme danger all night long. We never did run across the Marine company we were supposed to. Finally, in the morning, we finally found our way back to camp, and yeah, we were any exposed part of our bodies was covered with leeches, and we were stinky from the swamp and from the going through rice paddies, stumbling through them all night long. So that was one case where we we had kind of a scary night, but didn't amount to anything. Yeah, being as we were stationed up there right by the DMZ, the Air Force did a lot of missions up there along there. They were trying to, they would be bombing, and the Ho Chi Minh Trail came right on by where we were, evidently. And so we would get to see some tremendous air shows, or so to speak, where the Air Force would come in. First would come they'd drop from bombs from high up, and even the napalm ones. We'd see the napalm bombs drop, and you would see a horrendous flash of fire, and it was just a few miles away from where we were. And then after they would supposedly soften them up with the major bombs and napalm, then would come in the helicopters, the gunships would come in and just lay down just horrendous fire. It was really was spectacular to see from our perspective. So even though we weren't right under it, but we were close enough to observe all that was going on, and that was pretty exciting for just to see what they were doing over there. Yeah, up along the DMZ too, they would spray Agent Orange to cut down the foliage so that they could see the trails better. So, yeah, we would see areas where the planes would come through, drop and spray, and then later or different times I would see areas where there was no foliage on any of the trees, and so yeah, I direct exposure to Agent Orange, it's hard to say, but I was in areas where Agent Orange was certainly used. Yeah, even though I was, it was before the Tet Offensive started. Things were heating up in up near the DMZ already in our area, with some of the attacks and whatnot. And I could see God's providence in the fact that just when that was starting to begin, I was transferred down to Pleiku, which was more of a it was supposedly a very safe headquarters company, and I was sent down there, and shortly after I was down there, they hadn't had an attack there at that Pleiku since the French were there, and I wasn't there no 2 weeks, I don't think, and all of a sudden we had a mortar attack there, and I was probably the only one. I was the only one in a big barracks down there that was even had any kind of combat experience. And when I heard that first mortar hit, I had my flak jacket on and my rifle, my flak jacket, and my shoes, and I was in the bunker, in my underwear, and all of a sudden I realized that no one else had come. And I said, what's going on? So I had to go, I went back in the barracks and I hollered at these, grab your rifle, gun, flak jacket, get in the bunker. And so they did, they were confused a bit, but yeah, but that sound of a mortar coming in, you never forget that. You can hear that, and then, but anyway, afterwards they laughed about it. The guys, that Brummel, tell you what, the first boom and that guy was out of there, you couldn't believe it. But so I got teased about it a little bit, but they were actually respectful of it too, so that was kind of different. Yeah, it wasn't too long after I was in Pleiku too that I was still in some contact with the radio people up there through my friends who were teletype operators that I dealt with, and so we had heard that they were under attack, so we got together in the radio room. I got together in the radio room with the other teletype and radio men, and that was one of the saddest parts of my tour, and something that still haunts me is because they were under attack, and the last that we heard is these guys' their last transmission was that they were hiding under their desk, just waiting for the end, so to speak, because these guys weren't fighters, they were just the radio men. And I never did hear. We do know that the camp got overrun, but I never did hear for sure, but I'm assuming that they lost their lives there, and that was something that really to this day still bothers me. Yeah, after I'd been in Pleiku a little while, the commanding officer, which was he came in and brought me. I had a repair shop down there, and I didn't have a lot of repair work with any civilian type of things. I only had military, which were very simple to work on. Anyway, he brought in his big stereo system, and in that day those guys had stereos that were, oh man, about like that big, you know. And then that didn't even include the speakers, but they were big fancy outfits they could pick up, and when they would order them through the PX or whatever. Anyway, his wasn't working, and he brought it into me, and he said, he asked me if I could fix that here. He wanted me to fix it, just as if I knew what I was doing. And I didn't dare to tell him, well, I don't know how to fix something like that. So I thought, well, at least I'll do is look at it. And I did. I took the thing apart, and lo and behold, I found what looked like a little capacitor in there that was blackened or burned out. So I took a little fine piece of wire, and I soldered it around that capacitor, and we plugged it in and put it on, and boom, the thing worked beautifully. And I'm sure it wasn't quite as good as the original, missing one capacitor, but I didn't care. It sounded pretty good to me. And he came and got it, and he was just tickled to death with it that I'd fixed it. So he told me, he said, I'd like to put you in for some rank, for more rank. And then, so he looked it up, and he said, well, I can't put you in for more rank under radio repair. You're at the highest level you can be for your job. But he says, I got an opening in radar repair for an E5, he says, I can put you in for that. And I said, well, I don't know anything about radars. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you some stuff. So he brought over a handful of radar manuals, and so he said, well, now you look through them, and that way, if anybody ever asks you questions about it, you know something about radars. Yeah, so I looked through them, and sure enough, a week or two down the line, I got my raise. I got E5, which is pretty much unheard of for only a year and a half a little over a year and a half in the service. So I made about as much rank as I could make, and I got combat pay, I got hazardous duty pay, I got as high a pay as you could possibly get for being in the military for that rank. I could see the Lord's providence also in the fact that my time was getting to be up, and this was in October of '67 or September of '67, and the Tet Offensive started in January of '68. So I got out of there just in time to get away from because after that things changed drastically for a few years, at least I shouldn't say a few years, for a month or two. It was very dangerous anywhere in Vietnam, and especially up along the DMZ. That was almost complete. Well, it finally became time for me to go home. When you get to be a short timer, you start to get real nervous. Everyone does. When you start having a month or so to go, there was story after people who had been there the whole year, and they're all excited about going home, and boom, they get killed in the last month. And so you get to be a little superstitious about it. You're about going home and talking about short time. And then when you got to be a short timer, you'd get the short timers would carry around with a short timer stick. So you could tell anybody was getting close to going home, they would carry around with a little thing. And I bought a staghorn that was about that long, and then you could screw off the back, and then there was a little blade inside there, that I had seen in a native shop there. So I bought that. Well, so I packed up my stuff, but I wasn't allowed to. You're not allowed to send knives and stuff like that home. But I did take a chance, and I threw in a couple bayonets that I had gotten in trade for things, and I had to break this. My sergeant saw it and made me break the knife off in that little, because that was a concealed weapon of some sort, evidently. So after I got home, I put a new one in there. But anyway, the trip home was an experience in itself, because at that time was it was beginning to be the protests were starting up in full force. It was just at the time when it was really starting, and I everybody I flew home and I didn't have any good clothes. All I had was my fatigues, and anyone could see by looking at me that I was coming directly from Vietnam, because they were completely faded, almost faded, faded. So by the time I got to stateside I got mustered out in Fort Lewis, Washington. And that was a kind of an experience too. We got in late at night, and we were hungry and tired, and the base wasn't prepared for us, and so they amongst my group were a lot of very, very seasoned infantry men who had been through a lot more than I was, and we were being delayed and delayed and delayed, and finally a bunch of these guys were ready to tear the place apart. I mean, they were going to, because they weren't doing anything. So finally, they got the commanding officer of the base out there, and he calmed the group down. He got all the. This was like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. He got the cooks up, and he made them cook steaks for the whole group. So. But they were ready to really just tear the place apart, because but fortunately he knew what he was up against. These guys didn't care. These guys, they didn't care about anything. I mean, they would have just wrecked the place. And so of course I was amongst it, but it turned out good. But anyway, after that, we got our discharge papers out of there, and so I got on the plane to go home. And from there on, that's when it got interesting, because I had to fly through several different airports and on different planes with civilian planes, and everywhere I went, people were asking people would ask, what do you think about the war? What do you think about the war? I didn't think about the war. That wasn't my job. My job was, I did what I had to do. The politics of it, I never even thought about. That wasn't even part of my thinking. And so I'm confused, and everybody's wanting to know what I think about the war, because right now protests are going on. And so I was just, all I wanted to do was just get home, just to be home. And when I landed in Sioux Falls, that was just so exciting. You just wanted to kiss the ground when you got there. It was just that exciting. And there were, my parents and little sister Glennie, I think, was the only one. Oh, maybe, I don't know if the older girls were there anymore or not. But anyway, they were there to meet me. And then to get home, and then it was a bit of a transition to do. But I got busy pretty much right away. And then I took opportunity to take my little sister to school, where I knew Sharon was going to be teaching, and so I did that, and then I took every opportunity to go pick her up, and then we'd talk a bit, when I'd pick her up pick Tiffany Glennie up from school, and then we started dating, and Mom was my rock. I was, I came back confused, and I don't know. There again, how the Lord used that, and that was so providential. If I hadn't connected with her so quickly like I did, I don't know where I would have ended up. She turned out to be just the solid base that I needed at that time. And so we dated and we married rather quickly, and that was a blessing as well, because in the process I didn't have time to think about much else. I was just thinking about what a wonderful, woman I had, at that time, and shortly, yeah, after that we started having a family, and so I really didn't have time to dwell on issues of Vietnam, and that sometimes came later, but she was always my rock through this. Yeah, the thing is, I never really talked about it. Sometimes if we would be watching television or something, and you'd see a documentary or things on Vietnam, um, I realized that I wouldn't sleep that night very well. But if I had a form of PTSD, it was a very mild form. The thing is, I never felt like I was. I never felt that I had a right to have it because I didn't go through what the Marines and what the infantry did as far as their being exposed to constant battle. I had limited exposure to it compared to them, but I had more exposure to it than what I was trained to have, and I think maybe that was part of it too. But another thing is you got to remember all this happened. When you're only 20 years old, 19, 20, or 20 and 21 years old when this does, and those are years that are basically out of your life where others are going to college and having fun and dating, and you're over there, and some of that maybe affects you. But I never really had as much trouble with it as there were times in my life when there'd be extra stress, like when my brother Joe had his accident, and I was having to take care of his chores for him, plus work full time. I wasn't getting enough sleep. Um, I at times like that I would have more trouble with memories and stuff like that. And then in other times too, if I was really overloaded with consistory work or bad deals or dealing with serious issues with that, or when I was helping take care of my parents when they were older, and then I really never even talked about it much. But slowly on, probably after I was almost 70 years old when I first started talking, I started to tell some of the stories about it, about Vietnam and about my experiences. I really never talked about them until slowly on. The grandkids would ask about it, or when I'd go on a hunting trip with one or another, I would start to open up about it a bit, and to tell some of the stories. But then it still was very hard to do without crying, and I didn't like that. I didn't like to tell the stories because quite often I'd start crying. So then you feel foolish. And I had a few instances like that earlier too. Like when I was in the dentist chair one time, and the dentist he found out I was a Vietnam vet. He started asking questions, and you pretty soon, I mean, you start crying. And it's just embarrassing, So I didn't like to talk about it because of that. But I found out later, as I would get through those stories after crying maybe once or twice, I could do it easier. And so I started to tell more of the stories, and even Mom never heard any of them until I was probably in my 70s, or turned 70, before she even heard about a lot of them stories about Vietnam. Yeah, the basic things and the stories that I had put in that book that I wrote, that time. There's some stories in there, but those were the more basic things. I didn't talk about things that hurt, put it that way. Yeah, the thing is, when I think about this, the whole experience from beginning to end, I see how God used that to uh, to get me to the wife that I have, the family that I have. All of that worked together, and I I don't know how to, um, say specifically how that is, but I can certainly see God's hand throughout all of it. The, now today it's Memorial Day, and I was asked to put some of these thoughts down, and I'm sure there's some of these things are I remembered, but there's many things I don't remember as well, or I don't think of it now. But in some ways, it's good. It's good to have talked about it now, and I think I can do it easier than I used to be able to.